All right, everybody, welcome to the Timga podcast. Today I'm here with a special guest, here with Dr. Fung. He is an internal medicine associate professor of medicine at the University of Colorado School of Medicine. He's also the medical director at the Colorado Works for International Physicians, also known as the CoWIP program. Dr. Fung, welcome to the show, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Hey, first of all, tell me about how did you get into this space of working with IMGs and trying to help them get into residency and into this, because I think it's community work, trying to help more physicians, especially culturally competent physicians, take care of our patients. When did you get into teaching and, whether it's in maybe like when you were in residency or after residency or during practice, when did you get into teaching and, helping new physicians?
Well, actually, I had great experiences in med school and residency with IMG residents and IMG attendings. And so I've always thought that they could be really great doctors, that it was that their being an IMG shouldn't be a barrier to practicing medicine as long as they could do the work and do the work well. And so I've always had really good experiences with them from the very earliest stages of my training. And to this day, I still think some of the best physicians that I had worked with in residency or as attendings, a bunch of them were IMGs. So I really have no reason to think that couldn't happen all over the country. In particular, the CoWIP Clinical Readiness Program, I was pulled in by my boss and friend, the Chief Education Officer here at Denver Health, Dr. Abraham Nussbaum, and he was instrumental in helping get some laws passed, or a law passed in the state of Colorado that would create a pathway, a structure. More, it wasn't really built out in the law, but it was basically more like a scaffolding, if you will, for a program that would allow IMGs in Colorado to find their way back into the practice of medicine in the state of Colorado. And then he knew about my interests in various cross-cultural issues. I am the child of immigrants myself, and so I have honestly a soft spot for the immigrant experience and what it takes to come to the United States and live cross-culturally and be a part of U.S. society that way. And then so he knew that I had that background and just said, hey, I've got the chance that we might have some funding for a program. If you're interested, do you want to hear more about it? I was like, sure, I'll listen. Doesn't hurt to listen, right? And so he's like, this is where I'm at. If you're interested, I'd like to offer you this medical directorship. This is what the job looks like. You get to build this, and you get to build this however you want. He knows about my interest in medical education and formation of people as, towards the goal of being the good physician. And so all those things kind of came together. It was a practical way to use some of my research and thoughts that I had in other settings to build something. And we got the funding, and so here I am.
Let's go. That's amazing. So I want to go back a little bit to the bill or the law that was passed in Colorado. And I was following this when it was being passed and talked about. So from my understanding, there was a task force that put this together, right? And then they presented the findings or the research to the state legislature in Colorado. And that's when the state legislature voted on it. And from my understanding, the first year there was no funding attached to it. And then you guys got funding later down the road. Is that right?
Yeah, I forget the exact timeline. I was not involved in that stage. That was more Dr. Nussbaum's work. But my understanding is I think the bill was passed in 22. And I believe that we applied for the grant in the spring of 23. And when the bill was passed, there was no funding attached to it. You can do that in the state of Colorado. You can pass a bill that says we should work on such a program, but they won't fund it. And so the program won't exist until you find the funding. And that's happened in other areas of state government as well. And so Dr. Nussbaum applied for the grant in spring of 23, brought me on in summer of 23. We're building it all of fall of 23. And then we took our first group of IMGs and started them in January of 24.
Yeah. And can you talk about just for people who don't understand why this type of program was needed to help IMGs, get into residency or be able to, practice medicine and be more competitive? Because there's a lot of bills out there in the country these days. Everybody's excited about IMGs. especially after the pandemic. And, people want, especially and during the physician shortage too. So everybody wants to get culturally competent physicians and more physicians in our community. So there are some states who have alternative licensing pathways where there's, they work under the supervision of another physician in like a random clinic. And they, work with a doctor to get experience that way. And then maybe they graduate to full practice. You guys in Colorado have a different approach where the sole intent of the CoWIP program is to get people into residency so they can get that clinical experience program. So for people who don't understand it, what are the gaps in transition for an IMG? For example, if an IMG or a physician who graduates from another country, they come here, they maybe they pass all their medical exams and they do like a shadow. Before, the traditional way was they would do like a shadow with a physician and they would get a letter of recommendation. So, and that wouldn't work often. So what are the gaps that you saw, or the people that in your program that talked about why were they struggling to get into residency programs?
So this has multiple facets to your question. I'll start with this, the first one, is that we went ahead and asked the program directors, we're like, why don't you take IMGs? And so there were some structural issues in terms of state law about when IMGs could get a license. And so that bill that I mentioned that would turn into law, that actually changed that. So that removed some of those barriers so that IMGs were treated the same as US grads in terms of when they could get a license after a certain amount of time in residency. And that mattered to some of the residency programs in our state because some of them had internal policies to say, we're not going to look at anyone who can't get a license after the first year. Like the expectation in the program is that you get your license after your intern year. And because the law said that IMGs couldn't do that initially, they wouldn't take IMGs, right? So it was the combination of state law and their internal residency policy. Where that came from, I don't know. But now the law is that even an IMG can get a state license after their 1 year of residency. And so the programs that had that internal policy, they're like, okay, we can take IMGs now. So that helped with that one. The other barriers that when I talk with the program directors is that a lot of them didn't look at IMGs because they just weren't convinced. They just didn't know if they could do the same level of work as a US grad in residency. It was just a practical matter of, can you do what we expect an intern to do? And how do we know that you can do it? And observerships and others more short-term clinical experiences in the United States just weren't cutting it in terms of proving that people could do it. There's one anecdote from one program in our state who said that they gambled on one once and that person literally resigned 2 or 3 days in, couldn't do it, and they were left holding an open spot, right? And I mean, I'm sure someone tried to get back in, but I'm just saying, no one likes to have that happen. I'm sure that for that resident who tried that, that wasn't fun to do either. But they felt a little bit hesitant at that point to look at IMGs again because they didn't want to have that same experience. And so our program is designed to make sure that people get U.S. clinical experience that's very similar to U.S. medical students, so that when I evaluate them, when I write a letter, when they go through our evaluation process, we hold them to the same standards as a U.S. fourth-year medical student so that we can say in a letter, and when I talk to the program directors, hey, this person is operating at the level of a U.S. fourth-year student. Here's the evidence. Here's the notes they write. Here's how many patients they saw in our program. Here's what their external, we partner with an external group called CPEP that actually does pre and post evaluations for us. And we say, don't hold back. Tell us where they stand in like the sort of, in your assessment of them. Are they residency ready? Are they operating at the level of an intern? Where are they? And we integrate all that into our conversations with the programs in Colorado so that they know exactly where we're coming from and what they've done and what they've seen and so forth.
That's amazing. So basically what you're saying is that you're giving the assurance or the confidence to residency program directors that bring on an IMG to their program that, hey, we've worked with them, and if you take them on, they'll hit the ground running on day one. So you don't have to spend extra resources on them, or you don't have to spend too much time, or you don't have to be worried that they won't finish the program because they've taken the same U.S. clinical experience as a fourth-year medical student. Is that right?
Yes, very similar. I mean, obviously, since our grant funding is targeted to create more primary care physicians, I'm not putting our people in a lot of time in like the operating room or super subspecialty settings. But we're doing a lot of primary care, outpatient, pediatrics, inpatient general adult medicine, some palliative care, a little bit of psychiatry, a little bit of L&D, a little bit of surgery clinic. So they see, pre and post-op evaluations, wound care, things like that. We're really trying to give them an experience that really would primarily look like what we see, graduates of internal medicine and family medicine programs do. Not going to fellowship, but just what do they do? So they do hospital medicine, they do outpatient, they do some primary palliative care. In family medicine settings, they'll often do some wound care. Obviously, everyone does pre-op, post-op evaluations, things like that. So we're just trying to, and some primary psychiatric care, right? These are all things that you're going to do if you're going to do primary care. So that's what we expose them to in our program. And again, going back to your earlier question about why do we do it, like what are the barriers that we see and why did we choose to do it this way? I think one of the reasons that we felt was really important is that we did not want to create multi-tiered systems. And this is not to say that the other programs in Tennessee and Texas aren't good. They serve a particular need. But for us, we felt that what we wanted to do was we wanted to create primary care physicians that could practice in any number of settings to meet any number of needs and not merely the rural needs or just the underserved needs or whatever. So for example, if someone wanted to come back and do academic medicine, if you are not board eligible or board certified, you basically can't get faculty jobs here in Colorado or elsewhere. And so if we wanted these people to come back, these IMGs, to come back and be faculty family medicine physicians in our clinic or wherever in our clinics or other places, they need to be board eligible and eventually board certified, which you can't do for some of these other alternative pathways, even if you get an unrestricted license in these other states. And so, again, not that those are inherently bad, but at least in our case, we felt if we wanted to really build it out so that they could practice, we want to give them the freedom to practice anywhere they wanted to eventually, that they need to go through the same pathway that U.S. grads go through, where they can also practice anywhere they want eventually. And so that's one of the goals that we had, was to make it as equitable as possible. With, again, and the other bonus is, then we know their training, right? If someone goes through some of those other pathways, I don't necessarily know the details of their training and their experiences, but if you go through a residency program, ACGME tells me what you've done, what competencies you've mastered. I know what I'm getting when I hire you, if I'm hiring you in my practice or if I'm considering you for a faculty spot or whatever. Whereas there's at least a chance that when you create those other pathways, they might get people through them faster, but you also perhaps have less standardization or less knowledge about just exactly how well trained they are.
Yep, that's a really good point. And I do believe this at my core as well, even though in Washington State, we have an alternative pathway, but we haven't transitioned to that independent license structure yet because, our policy and, everybody in Washington State, what we want to do is we want to ensure that, there's board certification opportunities. And we've been having conversations with ABIM and, all the medical boards out there on, hey, would you allow these doctors to sit for the board exams? And we have been getting some, really good responses on creating like a fellowship, small type fellowship program, or and also like ABMS released a document as well for some requirements that the alternative licenses would get board certification. So board certification is huge and it's very important to me as well. So thanks for bringing that up. That's really important. So Dr. Fung, so you got the job. Dr. Nussbaum says, hey, take over the CoWIP program, which stands for the Colorado Works for International Physicians. On day one, you're running this thing. What do you do?
I learn. I ask lots of questions. So that first few months, I spent a lot of time, like I said, emailing and calling program directors and be like, hey, we're starting this program. I'd love to hear what prevents you from taking IMGs. And that's when I hear about the stuff about, like I said, the stories about how they tried and didn't work out, test scores are always low, or the graduation dates are too far back, and all those things are barriers that I can't change their test scores and I can't change their graduation date, but I can bring them up to speed. And so that's when I realized that what I need to do is I need to bring people up to speed so that when I call them back up, when I call the program directors back up and be like, oh yeah, they can do it. Here's my proof. Well, what's my proof? My proof is that I put them through the paces like a U.S. medical student.
And how long did this data collection process take you?
Several months. I mean, I would just email people. I'd ask, and I talked to the folks at the University of Minnesota Bridge program to build off of their experiences, because I know that I specifically built our program to mimic theirs. And so I want to learn from as many people who've done it before as possible. And University of Minnesota is really the only program that's set up for like this and for any length of time with great success. and great support from their faculty and from their state, I believe, as well, in terms of state funding. And so I kind of copied them. I had less funding for some things, but I had dedicated funding. So I'm like, I got this. And so I've started emailing and asking faculty members and other folks who I know are dedicated to medical education and who might be interested in IMG medical education. And I got a lot of input from my colleagues here at Denver Health, people who are interested in stuff. And so I built a team between family medicine, internal medicine, and pediatrics to be sort of dedicated preceptors. And then I reached out to a lot of our our colleagues in other specialties, surgery, OB/GYN, palliative care, psychiatry, other things, like I said, that would go into what a primary care physician should have experience and knowledge doing. And so they've also offered their time and taken on our learners in the sort of the med student role, with a lot of great experiences, a lot of wonderful opportunities to see patients, write notes, put in orders, follow up. The same things that U.S. medical students do. And so I was talking to people for months, trying to just get people to buy in and know about the program, and that was huge. That's the first 6 months was that's all I did was ask people and sell the program and try to recruit people. And I also got to hire our extraordinarily competent program coordinator, Susanna, who you can't run a program, build a program like this without someone who's extraordinarily capable. And she has gone above and beyond, and she is spectacular. So that's that first 6 months was just build, learn, build, knowing that I would have to change it, which I have since then. We have definitely gone back and revamped things. But it's just find partners, learn, ask questions. That was the first 6 months easily.
Yeah. So, and from what I understand is for the first 6 months, you've been collecting this data, and it was just you and Susanna, even till today, right? It's just you and Susanna and the preceptors.
Yeah, officially in the program. Yeah, I mean, I the other attendings, I have an assistant medical director now who helps run the outpatient side of things. I have a director of scholarship and evidence-based medicine who helps the learners do journal club and case presentations and things like that, just to build up sort of some of those academic chops. But yeah, I mean, it's so we've built it out since then. But in terms of when I started, it was me and Susanna. And because of bureaucracy, I couldn't even get the funding for several months. Like the money was released to me, so I couldn't even hire Susanna until like almost right before everything started. Wow. So we hit the ground running.
Yeah. So, and for the preceptors, and you mentioned that you got some information, and then you started calling out your colleagues who would be interested in doing some preceptorship for the IMGs. Were the preceptors paid, or was it volunteered? And was any funding included in the state legislature for the preceptors?
Yeah. So the grant included funding for multiple attendings to buy out certain amounts of time to be preceptors. And so I do buy out some of their time to do that. In academic medicine, the model is FTEs, right, full-time equivalent percentages, right? So I buy out some of their time. They graciously give it. We've had to rearrange some of the clinic schedules to make it work for them, but I'm like, you do whatever it takes on your side to make it work for you. I just want to make sure you get paid for your time. And so they've been really, really great about being flexible in their clinic schedules and the details of that. Susanna helps manage a lot of those things. And then I also recruited, like I said, hospital medicine folks. Some of them are just volunteers. Like some of them are just like, yeah, I'm happy to take someone for 5 days this month. Next month they can't do anything, and the following month they can't do anything. So it just depends. So it really, so some are volunteers, some are paid. The paid people obviously have expectations of how many learners they take for how many clinic days or shifts. And there's also other things that they help support them as specific mentors assigned to some of the learners, or reviewing personal statements, helping do mock interviews for residency, things like that are a little bit more dedicated to our program. The paid preceptors do more of those things. Some of the other attendings, they're just volunteer preceptors where they say, all right, I'm on a shift, I don't have any medical students, come on over and spend 3 days with me and let's round. You go see those patients, present to me, just like a U.S. medical student would do on a teaching service. These people often just volunteer, so a couple shifts, say, come around with me, we'll go see patients, you go see those two, like again, the usual med student rounding with an attending sort of thing.
Yeah. And from what I understand, the program is 9 months long, is that right?
9 months. It's a paid employed position at Denver Health, which is what the funding provides, which is also different than many other programs, is that you're an employee at Denver Health, you get Denver Health benefits, you get a salary for the time that you're here while we're teaching you, training you, with honestly no strings attached on the backside. We ask them to prioritize. When we interview them and select them, we try to prioritize people who we think are highly likely to stay in Colorado. But we ask them, out of integrity, to apply to all the family medicine and internal medicine programs in Colorado. But we do not restrict them from applying outside the state or even moving out of state if they match or anything like that. We don't have any other service requirements on the backside. It is about as generous of a grant as I've ever seen.
Yeah. And so it's a 9-month program. And so in the beginning, you collected some data, you recruited some people. And how did you start with developing the curriculum on where people go through and the rounds that they take, and what kind of didactics you guys will do, and how did you structure and create the program from scratch?
Again, we built a lot off of the University of Minnesota Bridge program. So they had, in their program manual, they talk about, what topics they want to cover. We go off of a lot of AAMC competencies, right? Because we're trying to replicate, like I said, a sort of med student readiness for residency. And so we do a lot of AAMC competencies. Many of us have been faculty for well over a decade. So we have seen lots of med students and residents come through. So we know even just intuitively at this point, what makes for a decent or even a great med student or resident. And so we integrate that with, like I said, more explicit written AAMC core competencies or ACGME, competencies and things like that we're trying to bench, sort of like our benchmarks that we're trying to make. And so we use those. In terms of the didactic stuff that we give them, especially early on, a lot of it is just sort of a crash course in U.S. medical culture, right? Mm-hmm. This is the structure of a teaching team. This is U.S. medical, Western, bioethics. This is what the insurance landscape looks like. This is what post-acute care is in the United States, because lots of folks have zero post-acute care in some of the countries of origin, or if they have post-acute care, it's not like what we have, right? So it's just the existence of things and resources. We sort of say, here's what it's like, here's the acronyms, here's the structure, here's the pathway. Some of this stuff I wasn't even explicitly taught as a med student myself, and I learned sort of on the fly in residency and as an attending, right? So now we kind of just say, in outpatient, this is what it looks like to make sure you have access to mental health care and diabetes educator, things like that. In inpatient, this is what we have here, our services and different health, and just stuff like that, just sort of like laying out for them what the landscape looks like. Who can you call for help? This is what you do, right? The very practical components of that. This is what it is. This is what it is to practice medicine in the United States or to be a resident in the United States. And this is how you speak respectfully. This is how you respectfully call a consult. This is how you respectfully respond to someone who is less kind to you when you call a consult. Like very practical things like that as U.S. med students and residents, you again sort of learn by osmosis and observation. But because we only have 9 months with them, we spend a couple of weeks of just like explicitly saying, this is what you're going to see. This is this. You have really nice attendings and fellows who act this way, and you're going to have some not as nice ones. And this is, because you get both, right? So just very practical things like that. And so we brainstormed as all my preceptors and even the volunteer faculty are like, oh, did you guys talk about this? Because I noticed that this happened when I was working with them. So we just integrate all that feedback. We ask them constantly to tell us what's working, what's not. We'll make changes. We've made changes on the fly. We do lectures scattered throughout the months that they're on clinical rotations after the first few weeks of just hardcore lecture, just to sort of get them, the bare bones knowledge of how to be on rounds or in clinic. But we keep on working with them on, things like presentation, reading literature. Occasionally we have specialty folks come in to talk about things like sports medicine or specific things. We have a couple specific IMG dedicated lectures on what it means to be an IMG. Just sort of in the more global sense. The chair of medicine at the University of Colorado is an IMG, which is unusual, but he has been very generous with his time and his experience just to encourage and also give practical advice to our IMGs, because he's been through it. Yeah. He's been through it, and he's risen to the ranks to again become a chair of medicine at a enormous prestigious medical school. So he has all sorts of experiences and stories that he shares with our IMGs, and it's wonderful to have that sort of support. That's how we sort of built out sort of like the lectures and the topics, because again, if we're going to make them residency ready, we got to replicate what U.S. medical students either learn explicitly or sort of on the fly through their experience and through osmosis and just observation. because they spend 2 years-ish, right? 2 years-ish in the clinical setting by the time they're applying to residency. So we've got to cram a lot of that into even a shorter time while building up other skills that they already have and making sure that they are translated, frankly, into a U.S. system. Because a lot of them have plenty of skills and experience, but they just don't know how to present it in a way that is sort of helpful to a residency application.
Yeah, yeah. And Dr. Fung, my next episode actually that I'm talking on the podcast with is the Colorado Welcome Back program. And I know you guys have a great relationship with them. Are they involved in the recruitment process, or do you guys just recruit IMGs individually? Talk to me about the recruitment process. How does that work? How do IMGs apply? And like how many folks per year do you guys usually admit in the program?
So yeah, our partnership with the Spring Institute has been phenomenal. So the CoWIP grant actually has two parts, and part of it also funds their IMG assistance program, which is focused on getting people through the process up to ECFMG certification. And so they don't do a lot of clinical stuff. It's like a lot of test prep and sort of systems and sort of career planning and sort of those sorts of less directly clinically oriented aspects of the IMG experience. Once they get ECFMG certified, they do tell us about people who they've been working with that are ECFMG certified and are interested in our program and ready to apply to us. We only take ECFMG certified folks because, again, our goal is while they're with us, they will apply to residency. So we don't have any sort of limitations on applying to residency while they're with us, because that's part of what we provide is application support. And if you're not ECFMG certified, obviously you can't apply.
Yeah.
And so they refer folks to us. In the last couple of years, we've also had them basically build out a form on their web page that is the sort of preliminary application that just gathers data. And they screen folks just to make sure that they are ECFMG certified, that they've checked all the boxes, and are Colorado residents, things like that. And then they hand them off to us. Then we spend time reviewing their application, interviewing folks. We ask them lots of questions. We want them to talk about their experiences and what drives them to be a physician here in Colorado, why primary care, all those sorts of things. And then and that's when they've handed off to us, is we take over at the point of the interview. We interview folks, and then the clinical readiness program decide who we take at that point. We take 4 people a year. The funding's for 4 slots a year, 9 months. Again, paid employed position at Denver Health with benefits, and again, clinical experience, residency support, all that sort of stuff. And we wish we could do more, but I mean, between our capacity for taking on learners and as well as our funding and what the grants for, that's sort of our setup currently. Total applications varied the first year, obviously, because we were just getting started. We didn't have nearly as many applications and not nearly as diverse an applicant pool as we've had the last couple of years. Like the second year was, I don't even remember exactly the number of applications, but we got maybe somewhere between 2 and 3 dozen, maybe 27, 30 applications. This year it's a little bit lower, but we still have a ton. We just closed the application window, and I believe we had 17 applications for 4 spots. Which and our experience has been, again, once we get more, once word got out about the program, I think we had a lot more diverse applicants from all over who trained all over the world. And so our open houses have had 30, 40 people show up from all over the world and at various stages of their IMG journey. Some aren't ECFMG certified or just things like that, right? And haven't applied at all, some have applied a bunch of times and haven't been able to match. So we've got people from all sorts of places in that journey, and our applicants are also all over, from all over, all ECFMG certified, obviously, but also all over. Some have only been in the United States for literally only a couple of years, and some have been in the United States for decades. So it just depends.
Yeah, and so and the CoWIP program is amazing. I personally think it's one of the best programs in the country. But one of the criticisms, and, seriously, so you guys are doing amazing work. But one of the criticisms that I hear from people that I interview sometimes or talk to about the CoWIP program and the Minnesota Bridge program is they say, it's not efficient enough, or there's no efficacy compared to like the physicians that we need. If you're only training 4 people, how do you solve the bigger mission or the bigger issue of getting more doctors in patients, especially like with all the doctors that we have at the state. So how would you respond to those people who feel that like the funding is never going to be enough to train the number of people that we need?
Yeah, so I have a couple ideas about this. I agree with you that this is relatively inefficient, but it depends on what you count as efficient, right? Efficiency is a sort of value for what you invest in it, right? And so if you don't value what the final product is much, you're going to say it's inefficient, right? Or if you say it costs too much, and you only value the final product kind of, then of course you're going to say it's inefficient. So I think this is about competing goods. Is it good that IMGs become board certified? I would say that's an unequivocally good thing. Is it expensive to get them there? Yes. Is that a relative detriment? Is that a relative downside? Yes, I fully admit that. Okay. Would it be nice to get some people through the pipeline faster to at least licensure? Yes, which is what other states are doing. It's not a pathway to board certification; it's a pathway to licensure, right? Which is different than board certification. I think that's great. I think that there's a role for that as well. I don't think that we should only choose one model or the other. I think we should look at what the needs are and figure out which thing meets those needs. How much does it cost to get to that point? I just also want to make sure that we ensure high quality care, right? And so the question then becomes, with your different models, how do you ensure high quality care? That to me is how you can then gauge efficiency, right? So my argument for our program is that yes, this is a long-term proposition, but the outcome is a board-certified, well-trained physician held to the same standards as a U.S. grad, right? That's my outcome eventually, I hope, and that I think is worth a lot. So I'm willing to invest, or I like to sell to people that it's worth investing a lot to get that particular. I also recognize that there's a need to get people out sooner, and that's totally true as well. And so there is definitely a role for a shorter pathway that ensures, again, needs to somehow figure out how to ensure a level of competency that a mere license doesn't necessarily adequately convey, because a license is not the same as board certification. I would say it is not necessarily bad, but it's just not the same. And in practice, it is less rigorous to get a full license than it is to become board certified. That's just true. Yep. Because you have to actually pass this another test, right? And so the question becomes, how do you efficiently, with appropriate amount of investment of energy, time, money, get people through the system faster, so you can both get them a license to practice, but also verify they are competent. This is where our partnership with CPEP is, at least in the future, maybe something that we can do. If other states wanted to have an external evaluator with decades of experience, their CPEP is, I'm not sure there's any other organizations, I only know of CPEP, but their CPEP exists as an organization who's literally their job. They have built decades of experience of evaluating people. Are they competent to practice? And this is separate from licensure, and this is separate than board certification. But when we were talking here internally in Colorado about possible, shorter pathways, we talked about engaging CPEP more robustly and be like, well, there's this other pathway called a re-entry license in the state of Colorado. It doesn't explicitly say you should be evaluated by CPEP, but that would be then, people who qualify under that statute, or that part of the statute, could then go to CPEP to be evaluated as, are they clinically competent? I mean, you'd have to develop the right evaluation, but is it possible to do something like that to ensure competence? Yes. I'm not sure that some of these alternative pathways have built that in. I'm not an expert of the law. I can sort of read up and keep up on it, but I'm not sure that some of these other laws have as an explicit an external competency measure as that. But if you're asked, if those critics are right, though, it is expensive and it takes a long time. No question about it, but your outcome is different. Is there a need for a different pathway with a different outcome, with a different timetable? Yes. My argument is simply, if we do whatever we choose, we should ensure high quality, competent care. And you almost always need a third party to make sure that you don't have conflicts of interest and things like that, right? Because obviously the person who trained them is most of the time going to give a positive review of someone, because it's kind of tough to tell someone you worked with for months or years, you know what, I've been a bad teacher, you're not that good, right? Like, no one wants to say that out loud, right? Right? And you just can't, it's not going to happen, right? But if you have a third party group who's like, look, you give us the freedom to adequately do an external, relatively objective evaluation. We'll be honest with you. You be
Mm.
honest with us. Work hard together. We can find the right people. And I think
Yeah.
that's probably how I responded to them. It's like, yeah, you're totally right. Inefficient, slow, but different outcome than what some of these other programs are trying to do, which is great.
Mm.
I don't think
Mm.
we should do it all the same way. I think we should every state should probably have some version of both, right? Something that is more
Yeah.
long term, build up the board certification, people come back to academics, things like that, as well as people who are ready to run and just want to do good old primary care or medicine, wherever they are at, and just need to get the licensure. We just need to prove that they're competent in their field. Some of those other pathways can be good for that. If that person doesn't care about board certification, doesn't care about going back into academics, just wants to practice medicine in what they've been trained in doing.
Yeah.
You could do both. It's not an either or, right?
Yep. Nice. And speaking of rigorous training, one of the things that I've seen personally, like working with many program directors and educators in the state of Washington, is a lot of people tell me, "Hey, we can't take on a clinical experience program," and I'm glad that Denver Health is doing it. But a lot of hospitals here in Washington State, they tell me, "Oh, we can't take on a clinical experience program because there is a competition between learners. There's just too few learning spaces, and we have medical students and residents and nurse practitioner students and physician assistant students, and there's all these different type of providers that are trying to learn. So we can't just bring in an extra type of or provider or IMGs to have more competition within that space." So have you seen any competition in learning in Denver Health when it comes to those opportunities?
We have the volume. It's just yeah. We have the volume, and we have the willingness of the teachers, of the faculty. Occasionally, I spoke with the residency programs to make sure that we weren't stepping on each other's toes and things like that. But like at least the way our programs are set up, even on the teaching teams, on the resident teams, we don't always have a medical student on the resident team, and even if we have a medical student, we don't necessarily have medical students for every patient on that team. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So in terms of assigning a patient to a medical student level learner, we always have patients in the hospital that are and in clinic that are not seen by any learner. So all right, we'll just as long as the attending is willing to take on the responsibility of the teaching and supervision, there's always patients that again don't have any learner working with them, so they learn by taking care of them.
Yeah.
So we have the volume.
That's amazing.
I know some schools do not. Like I'll be honest, my medical school, our clinical rotations, the mantra was a student for every patient. A student for every patient and a patient for every student. So basically, the idea is that there would be no patient in the hospital that did a learning student assigned to them on any rotation. That was the posture of my medical school, and I get that too, because that's volume. You learn through just seeing a lot of patients and seeing a lot of different things happen and so forth. But that is because that was the safety net hospital was right there on campus with the medical school, so that was different from my medical school. Here at Denver Health, we are actually physically quite separate from the main medical school campus and the main university hospital. So we don't ever have structurally or whatever. We don't ever have too many learners ever in terms of just the availability of patients who can be seen by a learner with an attending supervising. So
yeah. So you have the IMGs, you recruited them, they go through this program, and you mentioned CPEP. For the viewers who don't understand who they are, I know you mentioned them a little bit. First of all, what does the acronym stand for, if you know it? And
I want to get up real fast. I never remember them.
And I also heard from a lot of IMGs that they can be pretty expensive. Maybe some people said 20 grand or something.
So it depends. Yeah. So CPEP is the let's see what they call it, the Center for Professional Center for Personalized Education for Professionals. And they are a nationwide, actually international, because they do work with Canadian physicians as well. They are all over the country. They have offices in Denver, here in Denver, and in Raleigh. And again, they have been working with various partners in the community, malpractice companies, practices, state medical boards, hospitals, whoever has felt the need to refer a physician for additional assessments, remedial work, things like that. They do things across specialties. They do all sorts of stuff. They have sort of, yeah, they do all sorts of things. You can look at their website. It's CPEPdoc, D-O-C, CPEPDOC.org, and to look at their stuff. I don't know, because we contracted with them to build a particular evaluation program for us. I don't know what it costs to just walk up to them and say, please evaluate me, right? Mm-hmm. So I think 20,000 is probably a bit much, because I know we have 4 people evaluated twice a year. And I mean, I don't know exactly how much we pay them, because this is not my, I don't know, my business manager and other people deal with this stuff. But I don't think we pay.
Thank God, right?
Yeah, exactly. I am not. That's not my deal. But I know for a fact that we do not pay that much per person.
Yeah.
When you break it down on a per person basis, I just know for a fact. And we do a pre and a post evaluation. Now, I'll be honest, our evaluation is not for licensure readiness, or our vision. You know, we say that that's not the level of competence that we're evaluating. So it would definitely cost more to evaluate you at a high level. No question about it. But I don't know the actual per person cost. And I know that might be a barrier, but that might also, I mean, I don't know what else to say. Like that's what it costs to make sure that people are, when people talk about efficiency, I'm like, if you don't have an external evaluator, what do you have? You have a single person who's been working with this person for 9 months, a year, 2 months, 2 years. I don't think people can be trained that way. I just don't know how much trust I would have, because I'm sure there would be so much variability, and I want more standardization in the evaluation of, okay, I'll own this. I am a biased academic physician. Okay? I have been in academics almost my entire career. I believe in standardization of large aspects of evaluation, right? That's what I believe. I believe it's good. It's not perfect. Don't get me wrong. It's not perfect. And I even work in palliative medicine, where that field literally resists too much standardization, because there are individual variations for patients, and what's good for individual patients is not always the same. So there's a place for standardization. There's a place for individual nuance. I'm not sure that it's good to have so much variation and nuance for, when you're asking me, how do we know if a IMG is ready to practice in the United States? I think that it is better to have standardization for that, to answer that question.
Yeah. And so you guys have been at this for almost 3 years, right? So can you talk about any of the successes?
2 years.
2 years.
2 years. So our first group finished this past fall. Our second group is hard to work on their ERAS applications now, and I am very pleased to announce that 3 of our first 4 participants matched in primary care categorical residencies in the state of Colorado, which is our primary outcome. Wow. And so 2 are in family medicine and 1 is in internal medicine.
Amazing.
And we just reached out to some program directors just to see how they're doing. And one of the program directors got back to me and said that person is doing quite well, and is on keeping up with all of the U.S. grad colleagues, and gave me a little bit of feedback on things that we could do a little bit better. So I'm investigating, what's the nature of what we could do better. So I'm always, again, soliciting that feedback. I'm getting it. And so that to me is a success too, right? That they're willing to tell me. They could just stop interviewing our people, right? That's always an option, right? They can just be like, this program's a bust, and we don't even need to give them feedback, because they're never be able to get it up to speed. So we're not getting that feedback. We are getting feedback that that programs continue to want to look at our program participants in their applications, and we are getting some substantive feedback of like, oh, they came to us and we actually think this could be better. So we're happy to integrate that. We're not even waiting to change things from year to year. We change things within the year. Once we hear that something needs to be changed, because we're like, there's only 4 of them, and there's only three of us in leadership. Like, we're hardly leadership. We're just kind of make things happen. We just ask people to help us. Can you do it this way instead? That's most of what I do. Can you do this, please? I'll help you. I don't know how we can do this, but here's what I think we should try to do now. It's a lot of it's asking for help and being willing to just try it. But anyways, the point is that we're very happy that 3 of the 4 matched. We're hopeful that this current group of 4 that we are working with right now will be able to have great applications and have lots of opportunities to interview and proceed with their match as well. We'll find out about them next March. As we work with our 3rd group. We are currently interviewing for our 3rd group right now. And I'm also trying to, in terms of success, I'm trying to build on the success and figure out how to keep the program in some form going. I doubt that we will have the same amount of state funding. Well, certainly we'll not have the same amount of state funding that we have now from on an ongoing basis. And so we're working with our state partners to try to figure out what's it going to look like. What can we get from state funding? What can we get from other sources, other grants? How can we even make it possibly self-sustaining by creating other assistance opportunities that we can offer, not just the big 9-month thing. But we met people who were more ready than for application to apply to residency and didn't need us.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we're thinking like maybe we could offer them some services to just help with the ERAS application or to do mock interviews or things like that, as just sort of the next iteration of a sort of a more robust sort of international physician program, right? Not just IMGs wanting to get into residency, but sort of like there are other programs that we have in Denver Health that we might want to build out to just bring in other physicians from other countries who are specialists who just want to learn from our specialists, right?
Yeah.
And that might be something that might be an international, that's not like an IMG trying to get into the license practice in the United States focus, but just what are we doing for international physicians? How are we making sure that the knowledge and the experience of us here in a academic center in the United States is being used around the world in other places so that we can make sure that it's not just us, right?
Yeah.
That other physicians and surgeons can learn from us. And so we have just in keeping with that, the University of Colorado and Denver Health has hosted visits from people from Japan or from Europe, physicians who are not trying to come to practice here, but just want to learn and see. We don't have much of a hospital medicine program. We don't do this procedure in our country, but we'd like to learn from you. And so we want to build out sort of both ends of like the international physician sort of programs or services, where we're both trying to bring people up to speed who have been out of practice or recently out of practice, trying to get back into practice, and also bring people who want to learn from our techniques. And we also send folks overseas into other places in the country to learn from other experts, right? So it's not just a come here, but it's like, we'll go and learn from you. You can come and learn from us. And we want to just create more collaboration, I want to say, between what we do here at Denver Health and also what international physicians can do, learn from us, and we can learn from them. There's just no reason not to expand sort of what we do with physicians from around the world.
Yeah, congratulations, man. Congratulations, Dr. Fung. You guys worked really hard, because I remember like we had conversations at the beginning of the program, and you guys were trying to find the right path and all that. So congratulations. It's been a long road, but I'm sure that you guys will be building on this. So I know we're running out of time, but just to kind of summarize everything, if somebody is listening to this, maybe they're in Colorado, maybe they're an IMG, or maybe they're not in Colorado. So is it like, you guys, how can they apply to the program for the round that you're accepting right now? And what's the kind of process that they can do?
So unfortunately, we just closed our application window for this last cohort. And so I cannot take any more applications right now. However, because I am actively trying to build the next iteration of this, you should definitely go to our website. You should email us, CoWIP@dhha.org. So that's COWIP@.org. That's the program's email. Express your interest. Tell us what you're looking for. Tell us what you need, because that allows me to demonstrate demand to my potential funders, to other things, helps me figure out where I should put my effort to build other versions of this program. Like I said, we're looking at everything from shorter clinical experiences to just offering sort of application assistance, mock interview stuff, personal statement reviews. One thing that we've noticed is that IMGs just don't really know how to sell, how to describe their experiences in ways that are meaningful to application readers. Where, like, I gotta be honest, some of them highlight a lot of their administrative roles, and I'm like, that doesn't mean anything to a residency program. They don't want to hear about like some sort of administrative component of a program you participate in. They want to hear about taking care of patients. They want to hear about community, building up community programs and community education, not just like, this is kind of an exaggeration, but like, they want to hear about stuffed envelopes. That's what they want to hear about. I gave these lectures on these topics to this population because they are their health literacy in this particular disease that impacts a lot of them is just low. right? Something
Yeah.
like that. That's a different sort of thing to put on your application than I made phone calls for this volunteer group, right?
Yeah.
That's not the same. Same
Yeah.
thing goes for clinical experiences, like even observerships. How you write about them matters. So, so we're just trying to think about how can we help IMGs. And so if you tell me, if you email us, you tell me what would be helpful to you. Um, then I can build something that meets your needs. I can figure out what the funding looks like for that, but I can't build something that helps people if I don't know what's needed, which is, again, sort of how I built it in the first place is why are programs not looking at IMGs? Let me address those things, concerns, if I can. So in
Yeah.
the same way, I can't build a program that helps IMGs if I don't know what IMGs um, are looking for. So short-term experiences, longer-term experiences, like I said, a lot of that depends on where people are coming from. Some people who are only a couple of years out of practice might be
Mm.
able to jump right back in with just a little bit of help, right? Just a little bit of orienting to the system and a little bit of understanding how to, do a good patient presentation on rounds, things like that. Whereas other people who've been out for longer need a longer term program because they have to really, brush up on some skills and things like that. I can't build something if I don't know what you need. And so if you are listening to this anywhere in the country, let me know because once this grant finishes, I don't have some of the limitations that the grant sort of had built into it because of the funding that it is. I can build this any way I want if I can find the funding. So I could take people from all over the country, or
Yep.
a number of possibilities exist if I can find the funding and if I know that there's a demand. I just don't want to build something that no one's going to apply to. Right, that would
Yeah.
really
Yeah. That's
that would be
true.
really
That's true.
unhelpful. So
Yep, that's true. And last question, and Dr. Fung. So, if there is another Phil out there, like who's trying to build a program like this in a hospital around the country, what advice would you give to that person?
that's a great question. I've thought about this a lot. I think one of the biggest things is you got to find good partners, and you got to make sure that everyone's in it with you. And this agreement means your institution. This means other attendings who would be taking on the learners. This means the medical board, your state medical board, because some institutions are a little bit wary about what to put someone who's both not officially a student, not officially a resident into a clinical setting, right? What does that look like? Like what's their liability, their exposure from a legal perspective? If you have some random person who's not a physician, not officially a med student, not officially a resident, what does it mean to have those in the clinical space? And so you got to make sure that you have everyone on board together. You got to find partners with, like I said, primarily your institution, the state medical board, and your attendings who will be taking these learners on. You need all of those three people to be on board with you so that you don't run into other issues along the way, I think.
Yeah. So how do you guys deal with that at the CoWIP? Like, is there like a specific license that?
So yeah, so I went to the Colorado Medical Board and explained what we were trying to do and asked for a restricted and especially restricted training license.
Mhm.
And so because they're technically employees, and so we do have some degree of sort of I don't want to say coverage because that's not the right word, but because they're employees and they are patient facing, we have an entire structure within our institution to know what category they fit in. But from a clinical perspective, in terms of EMR access, what role they play on teams and things like that, we categorize them as medical students, but they got a training license from the state medical board to just cover like their clinical validity, if that makes any sense. Like what allows them to be in the patient space is they have a training license.
Yeah.
They're not residents. They're treated as medical students, and it was again a very it was a series of conversations, and the medical board was very gracious and very generous to work with us on this. And I hope that we have proven to them. I think we have, and I think the feedback I've gotten from them is that they continue to approve our training license applications every
Nice.
year. Talk with them, and they continue to do it. So I think that they appreciate our upfrontness, our genuineness about what we're doing, how we're doing it, wanting to make sure that everyone's on the same page, wanting to make sure that everyone is protected, including patients, knowing that they are never on their own. They're always supervised by full attending, all those sorts of things. That everyone's on the same page and our partners are all on the same page. And so I think that makes a huge difference to making our program work. Because if the medical board, I think, gave us any trouble, I don't think the program would work. Or if my institutions, risk and quality people give me had any concerns, it just the program worked. And so we just had to be really upfront and make sure that we're all on the same page. Address everyone's concerns. That's key. If they bring something up, don't ignore it. You can't ignore some of these people. if they have a concern, you have to address it or the program won't work.
Yeah. And if the hospitals or somebody, like who's trying to build a program wants to contact you, can they do it on LinkedIn or the CoWIP email?
I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, but the easiest way is probably, again, that CoWIP email. That's directly to our program coordinator, and that'll get passed on to me, and then I'll be able to respond to it from there. We're obviously trying to keep everything sort of so we know who's the right person to answer some of these questions, because I as the medical director, I know about lots of stuff, but if the question is more specifically for like my outpatient colleagues, I am perhaps not the best person to answer. So at least if you email CoWIP, COWIP at dhha.org, that will make sure that it comes to our program, and then we can make sure that the right person answers your questions.
All right. Dr. Phil Fung, everybody, Associate Professor of Medicine at the University of Colorado School of Medicine and the Medical Director at the Colorado Works for International Physicians. Thank you so much, my friend, for coming on the show. And we'll definitely have you again. I'll bug you a couple more times.
Yeah, no, once we get more data and I get more feedback, I'd be happy to share our experience. I think this is a great way, not the only way, but this is a great way to get IMGs properly trained up to be a part of the U.S. physician workforce. So thank you for having me.